Humanity had long looked to the stars, dreaming of what lay beyond the reach of their world. The first probes sent out into the darkness had been nothing more than small whispers of ambition. But as decades passed and technology advanced, the whispers grew into roars. Humanity's reach stretched farther, and the universe they had once feared now lay open for exploration and conquest. In the year 2205, humanity achieved what no other species had. They mastered faster-than-light travel, making the vast distances of the galaxy seem trivial. With this newfound power, Earth's leaders formed the Galactic Exploration and Dominion Initiative, known as GAIDI. The mission was simple: spread humanity's influence across the stars, establishing new colonies and claiming the galaxy for humankind. No longer would they be confined to their home planet, watching as alien civilizations flourished and expanded without them. It was time for humanity to take its place at the top of the galactic hierarchy. The first few years of exploration were a mix of discovery and conflict. Humankind encountered many species, some peaceful, some hostile, but all of them vastly different. The first major encounter was with the Voltar, a reptilian species with an advanced warfaring culture. They saw humanity's expansion as a threat to their dominance and reacted with violence. But the humans, driven by their unmatched resilience, were able to not only survive the onslaught but also turn the tide. The humans' tactical ingenuity and ability to adapt in the heat of battle made them a formidable foe. The Voltar, who had once prided themselves on their supremacy, found themselves on the losing end for the first time in their history. This victory was the catalyst that would change the galaxy forever. The human victory over the Voltar quickly spread through the galaxy like wildfire. News of their ingenuity, determination, and strength in battle began to reach every corner of the galaxy. Other species, once confident in their place in the universe, began to rethink their stance on humanity. No longer were the humans just a fledgling species, they were a force to be reckoned with. And so, the first steps were taken towards what would become the galactic empire of humanity. The subsequent years saw humanity's influence grow exponentially. Planets that once belonged to other species were now under human control, either through military conquest or diplomatic persuasion. Some species, such as the peaceful Ketheri, willingly allied with humanity, seeing them as a powerful and fair partner in the pursuit of prosperity. Others, like the warlike Terrans, fought tooth and nail to keep their sovereignty. The human military, bolstered by the ever-growing fleet of advanced ships, decimated those who stood in their way. However, not all was smooth sailing. A growing resistance, led by the Zandari, a collective of alien species who had united in opposition to human dominance, began to form. They saw humanity's rapid rise as a threat to the balance of the galaxy. The Zandari believed that no one species should dominate the rest and that the galaxy should remain a place of equal power among all species. They launched coordinated attacks on human colonies and strategic military installations, hoping to weaken humanity's hold on the galaxy. But humanity, ever resourceful, responded with a counterattack that sent shockwaves through the galaxy. The human forces, led by Commander Sarah Rhodes, were known for their strategic brilliance. Sarah had been a key figure in many of humanity's early victories and had become a symbol of the strength and unity of humankind. Under her command, the human military struck back hard at the Zandari, pushing them back from human space and securing their dominance. In the midst of these battles, a new technological breakthrough changed the balance of power. The humans had discovered a way to harness the energy of stars, allowing them to power ships and weapons in ways that no other species had ever dreamed possible. This gave humanity an unprecedented advantage, and with it, they began to accelerate their conquest of the galaxy. Entire systems fell under their control, their fleets leaving behind only devastation in their wake. By the end of the first decade of their interstellar expansion, humanity had become the uncontested power in the galaxy. The once thriving civilizations of other species now found themselves either in submission to human rule or fighting a losing battle for their independence. Humanity had become the Galactic Overlords, and their name was spoken with a mix of fear and awe across every star system. But despite their overwhelming success, a question began to linger in the minds of the humans. What would they do now that they had claimed the galaxy? Was there more to the universe than just conquest? And could they hold on to the power they had so swiftly gained, or would their enemies, both alien and internal, begin to rise up against them? The rise of humanity as the dominant power in the galaxy came with both awe and resentment. Many of the conquered species were left in a state of submission, their once proud civilizations now under the iron fist of human rule. Others, however, adapted to the new order, either begrudgingly or willingly joining forces with the humans in hopes of securing a place in the new galaxy. But even with humanity's unchallenged supremacy, the question of what came next haunted the minds of the ruling council. Commander Sarah Rhodes, still a central figure in the Galactic Empire, found herself at the heart of this struggle. While she had led humanity's military to countless victories, the political aspect of the Empire was not her domain. Yet, it was clear that the growing unrest within the galaxy could not be ignored. The Xandari resistance, though shattered, had sparked a fire of rebellion in the hearts of other species. Rumors began to swirl of covert operations being conducted in the shadows, and while no open conflict had erupted yet, the human leaders knew that they could not afford to rest on their laurels. The Empire, while victorious, had begun to show cracks. The once unified front of humanity was starting to fracture under the weight of its conquests. Some humans, particularly those born on Earth, began questioning whether the constant expansion was sustainable. They spoke of the old days, when Earth had been a world of peace and prosperity, not a center of an empire that stretched across countless star systems. They feared that the very ideals they had fought to protect, freedom, justice, and democracy, were being eroded in the pursuit of power. As tensions rose within the Empire, Sarah was called upon to mediate between the differing factions. She knew the stakes were higher than ever. The galaxy's future hung in the balance, and every decision she made could either solidify humanity's place as rulers of the stars or destroy everything they had worked for. She could sense that something deeper was at play, a force that would challenge not only the Empire's reign but humanity's very place in the galaxy. Meanwhile, an unexpected ally emerged from the chaos. A former leader of the Voltar, who had once fought humanity tooth and nail, now sought to negotiate a truce. The Voltar had lost their power, but they still held influence over several systems. Their leader, a charismatic figure named Varlock, had seen the futility of continuing the war and instead proposed an alliance with humanity. He argued that the galaxy was too vast for any one species to dominate and that the only way to ensure stability was for humans and the remaining powerful species to share control. The human leadership was divided on the idea. Some saw it as a betrayal of their hard-won victories, while others, including Sarah, saw it as an opportunity for peace. The council's debates grew heated as they weighed the consequences of such an alliance. Would it be the dawn of a new era of cooperation, or would it be the beginning of humanity's downfall? As Sarah navigated the political turmoil, she was forced to confront her own beliefs about what humanity had become. She had once believed in the righteous cause of their expansion, convinced that they were building a better future for the galaxy. But now, she questioned if they were becoming the very thing they had once fought against. The weight of leadership, the responsibility for billions of lives, and the fear of an impending rebellion all weighed heavily on her shoulders. The emergence of the Voltar's proposal was not the only challenge Sarah faced. Deep within the Empire's core, a faction of humans who had grown disillusioned with the expansionist ideals began to form their own underground movement. They called themselves the Vanguard, and their goal was to bring down the Empire from within. They had already infiltrated key military and political positions, waiting for the right moment to strike. Sarah's intelligence network had uncovered traces of their operations, and though the Vanguard had not yet launched an open rebellion, their influence was growing. The galaxy was on the edge of a precipice, and no one knew which direction it would fall. The question remained, could humanity, in its quest to dominate the stars, avoid losing what made them human? Or would their rise to power prove to be their downfall? As the council deliberated over the Voltar's offer, Sarah began to prepare for a different kind of war, a war that was not fought with weapons, but with ideals. It would be a battle for the soul of humanity, for the future of the galaxy. And in the quiet corridors of the Imperial fleet, whispers began to spread. Humanity's greatest enemy might not be the alien forces at their borders, but the corruption and division festering within their own ranks. The galaxy, once united under humanity's rule, was now a powder keg, ready to explode. The question was not if the Empire would fall, but when. The tension in the Empire grew palpable as the internal divisions became more pronounced. The debates over the Vulture's proposal continued, with factions inside the human leadership pulling in opposite directions. Sarah, once a figure of unshakable confidence and strength, found herself wrestling with doubt. Her previous victories had been built on military might, but now, the heart of the issue was not a battlefield, it was the future of humanity itself. The vanguard, the growing underground movement within the Empire, had already begun to sow the seeds of unrest. They were not just isolated rebels, they were part of a broader ideological movement, made up of those who had come to see humanity's expansion as a dark mirror of the very forces they had once fought against. The group consisted of former soldiers, diplomats, and civilians who felt that the rapid militarization of the human race had corrupted its ideals. Their message was clear: the Empire was losing its soul. Sarah, who had once been celebrated for her tactical brilliance, now found herself walking a tightrope. Every move she made seemed to anger someone. The council, divided over the Vulture's offer, began to fracture in ways that threatened to undermine the Empire's cohesion. Some saw the Vulture as a necessary evil, a temporary alliance to secure peace, while others saw them as little more than a tool to keep the galaxy's lesser species in check. Still, others argued that any alliance with an enemy of humanity, especially one so stained by their past actions, would be a betrayal of everything the Empire stood for. Meanwhile, the Vanguard's influence continued to spread. It began to infiltrate the military, and whispers of a rebellion grew louder. The movement's leaders were careful, but their intent was clear: to dismantle the Empire from within, to return humanity to its roots. They believed the galaxy should not be ruled by one species, no matter how powerful it had become. They were determined to restore balance, even if it meant overthrowing the very system that had brought humanity to the pinnacle of galactic power. But there was one more factor at play: the galaxy itself. The newly conquered planets, though subdued, were not content to simply be ruled. Across the galaxy, pockets of resistance were beginning to form. The Xandari, though they had suffered severe losses in their conflict with humanity, had not disappeared. They were regrouping, building new alliances with those who resented human rule. The Kethari, once allies, began to grow disillusioned with the Empire's increasing militarization. Even the Terrans, who had once fought ruthlessly against humanity, were beginning to question their subjugation. The balance of power was rapidly shifting. Sarah understood this, but her concern was not only with external threats. The growing ideological division within the Empire was threatening to tear humanity apart from within. The question that haunted her was whether humanity could survive the very success they had achieved. Could they maintain their dominance without losing their humanity in the process? It was during this time of uncertainty that an unexpected messenger arrived. Varlock, the former Vulture leader who had once been humanity's enemy, came with an offer that changed the course of history. He proposed not an alliance of convenience, but a true partnership, an equal sharing of power between the Vulture and humanity, with the understanding that their mutual survival depended on cooperation, not domination. Varlock, now a disillusioned figure after witnessing the destruction his people had caused, believed that the galaxy could not survive under the rule of one species alone. His proposal was not just about peace, it was about saving the galaxy from itself. Sarah's initial reaction was one of skepticism. The Vulture had been fierce enemies, and their culture was built on the idea of survival of the fittest. Could they truly change, or was this just another ruse? But the more she considered the proposal, the more she realized that the galaxy was indeed at a crossroads. If humanity continued on its current path, it would not just face rebellion, it would face a galaxy-wide collapse. The unity they had achieved would crumble under the weight of internal division and external resistance. The next few weeks were filled with secret negotiations, with Sarah at the forefront of talks between the Vulture and human leadership. She knew that this partnership, though difficult to achieve, might be humanity's last chance to avert a war that could devastate everything they had fought for. But even as the talks progressed, Sarah knew there were forces working against them, both within the Empire and among the alien factions. As the clock ticked down, Sarah made a bold decision. She would address the Empire herself, laying out the future of humanity in a speech that would be broadcast across every star system under human control. It was time to confront the truth: humanity could no longer be an empire built solely on conquest. They had to evolve, to adapt, or risk losing everything. Her speech, delivered in a cold, unwavering voice, laid bare the reality of the situation. She acknowledged the Empire's victories, but also the cost of those victories. She spoke of the growing divisions within the ranks of humanity, and the threats that now loomed both from within and outside the Empire. She called for a new era, one of cooperation, not domination, where humanity would lead by example, not by force. The alliance with the Voltar, she argued, was the first step in ensuring that humanity would not become a conqueror but a leader in a galaxy of diverse and equal species. The reaction to Sarah's speech was mixed. Some saw it as a betrayal, a sign of weakness in the face of growing resistance. Others, however, saw it as a beacon of hope, a chance to forge a new path for humanity, one that would avoid the mistakes of the past. The future of the Empire hung in the balance, and Sarah knew that the next few months would determine whether humanity could hold on to their place in the galaxy, or whether they would be swept away by the tide of rebellion and dissent. As the days passed after Sarah's speech, the galaxy remained on edge. The reaction to her words was immediate and mixed. In the heart of human-controlled space, many saw her call for cooperation as a desperate attempt to salvage the crumbling empire. Those in power, particularly within the military, feared that such an appeal for peace would only embolden their enemies. The Voltar, once bitter foes, were now viewed by many as a necessary evil, their proposal of alliance viewed as a lifeline in a galaxy teetering on the edge of chaos. But not everyone agreed. There were factions within the Empire that saw Sarah's speech as a sign of weakness, a betrayal of everything humanity had fought for. These voices, though initially quiet, began to grow louder in the corridors of power. They argued that humanity's supremacy had been hard-earned and that compromise with the alien species would only invite more rebellion, more conflict, and ultimately the downfall of humanity's dominance. To them, Sarah was no longer the brilliant commander who had led them to victory but a leader willing to compromise their future for the sake of peace. In the midst of this political turmoil, the Vanguard's influence continued to spread. Their message of reform, of returning to humanity's roots and rejecting the expansionist ideals that had taken the galaxy by storm, resonated with more and more people. The underground movement began to grow in strength, their covert operations becoming bolder. They had no intention of simply dismantling the Empire from within, they wanted a revolution, one that would bring down the entire structure of human dominance. The Vanguard's ultimate goal was clear: humanity should be a part of the galaxy, not its rulers. As the tension mounted, Sarah knew she had only a limited window of time to act. The Empire was beginning to fracture in a way that could not be ignored. The leadership was split, and the military, once united under a common banner, was now divided over the direction humanity should take. Some generals and admirals were loyal to Sarah, believing in her vision of a future based on cooperation, while others viewed her as a liability. Her position was precarious, and the fate of the galaxy seemed to rest in her hands. It was during this time of uncertainty that an unexpected ally came forward, Admiral Elias Kane, a veteran of the wars against the Voltar and the Terrans, and one of the most respected military figures in the Empire. Kane had always been a staunch believer in human supremacy, but his experiences during the wars had left him disillusioned with the endless conflict. He had watched as humanity's military might had grown unchecked, but he had also seen the toll it had taken, on the soldiers, on the civilians, and on the very fabric of the galaxy itself. Kane's message was clear: the Empire could not survive another war. The constant expansion, the endless campaigns, were unsustainable. He believed, like Sarah, that humanity had to adapt, to find a way to lead without ruling. He offered his full support to Sarah, using his influence within the military to rally those who shared her vision. The alliance between Sarah and Kane was a turning point. Together, they were able to rally enough support to pass a series of reforms within the Empire. The military would be restructured, with a greater emphasis on diplomacy and cooperation. The expansionist policies would be scaled back, and resources would be redirected towards rebuilding the war-torn regions of the galaxy. The Vultures' offer of an alliance would be accepted, but with the caveat that humanity would no longer pursue a policy of domination. It would be a true partnership, based on mutual respect and shared responsibility. But even as Sarah and Kane worked to bring about this new order, the Vanguard continued to plot in the shadows. They were not convinced by the reforms, believing that humanity could never change its nature. They saw the alliance with the Vultar as a temporary distraction, a way for the Empire to regain control, but they were determined to see it destroyed. Their insurgency grew more aggressive, their attacks on military installations and key infrastructure becoming more coordinated. They were no longer a fringe group, they were a full-fledged rebellion, and they had the support of several influential factions within the Empire. The situation was becoming dire. As Sarah and Kane worked to implement the reforms, they knew that they were running out of time. The Vanguard's rebellion was gaining momentum, and there were whispers that a full-scale civil war was imminent. The galaxy, once united under humanity's banner, was now on the brink of division. In an effort to prevent the collapse of the Empire, Sarah called for a summit, an unprecedented meeting between the leaders of humanity's military, political, and diplomatic factions, as well as representatives from the Vultar and other key species. The summit would be humanity's final chance to forge a new path forward, one that balanced power with cooperation and peace. But even as Sarah prepared for the summit, she knew that the real test was yet to come. The Vanguard had already made their move. They had infiltrated the summit, planting spies and saboteurs within the ranks. They were determined to ensure that the summit failed, and that humanity would once again be drawn into a war that could destroy everything. As the day of the summit approached, Sarah found herself facing the greatest challenge of her life. Would she be able to unite the galaxy, to forge a new future for humanity, or would the forces of rebellion and war drag them all into the abyss? The fate of the galaxy rested in her hands, and she knew that every decision, every move she made, would shape the future for generations to come. The summit, held in the heart of human-controlled space, was humanity's final attempt at forging a new path forward. Sarah Rhodes stood at the forefront, surrounded by the leaders of the Empire and representatives from the various species now under human control, including the Vultar. It was a tense atmosphere, as every leader was aware that this summit would either mark the beginning of a new era of peace or the final collapse of the Empire. The galaxy was on the brink, and Sarah knew that the stakes could not have been higher. But as the summit began, Sarah could feel the weight of uncertainty pressing on her. She had no illusions. There were powerful factions within humanity's leadership, and even within the alien races, that were determined to maintain their hold over the galaxy. The very idea of sharing power, of reducing humanity's military dominance, was unpalatable to many of them. The military hardliners, who had come to see themselves as the true protectors of the Empire, were already preparing for the possibility of the summit failing. Their loyalty to the old ways, to the idea of human supremacy, had been solidified in years of war and conquest. They would never accept a galaxy where humanity wasn't firmly at the top. The Vultar, too, had their own motivations. Though Varlock had proposed the alliance as a path toward peace, many of his people still saw the galaxy as a battleground for survival. Their leadership, though weakened, had not entirely relinquished their old mindset. Varlock's vision for a true partnership with humanity was met with skepticism from his own people, some of whom feared that this cooperation would lead to a loss of their own power and identity. Varlock himself was caught in the crossfire, trying to convince his people that collaboration with humanity was the key to their survival in the new galactic order. His every word was scrutinized, and his influence, though substantial, was not absolute. In the early hours of the summit, Sarah addressed the gathered leaders, outlining her vision for the future. She spoke of the need for cooperation, mutual respect, and shared responsibility. The message was simple: humanity could no longer lead through force alone. They had to prove that they could build a galaxy where peace and prosperity were not just ideals but achievable goals. But even as she spoke, she knew the challenge was not in her words but in convincing the others to accept them. Tensions flared quickly. The first to speak against Sarah's vision was General Marcus Hayes, a well-respected leader within the military, who had once fought alongside Sarah in the wars against the Voltar and the Terrans. His voice, filled with indignation, reverberated through the hall as he condemned the idea of a soft empire. He argued that humanity had built its power through bloodshed and sacrifice, and to abandon that path now would be to dishonor everything they had achieved. His words were met with applause from many military leaders, and it was clear that a significant portion of the human leadership was not ready to accept a galaxy governed by cooperation rather than conquest. Varlock, who had agreed to attend the summit as a symbol of his commitment to peace, rose to respond. He spoke in measured tones, emphasizing the need for both humanity and the Voltar to move beyond their past conflicts. He reminded the assembly that the galaxy was too vast, too diverse for any one species to dominate indefinitely. "This galaxy does not belong to any one race," Varlock said. "If we are to survive, we must share it." But as Varlock spoke, Sarah felt a growing unease. There was something off about the proceedings, something she couldn't quite place. The summit, which had been heralded as a beacon of hope for the galaxy, was beginning to unravel. Beneath the surface of the debate, she sensed an undercurrent of sabotage. Whispers spread among the delegates, and Sarah saw the glint of suspicion in the eyes of several of her allies. The Vanguard had infiltrated the summit. It became clear to Sarah that the Vanguard had been preparing for this moment. They had planted operatives within the summit, and now they were working to fracture the fragile alliance that was being forged. The tensions between the human factions and the alien representatives were being stoked, and it wasn't long before the first act of sabotage took place. A series of coordinated attacks on key infrastructure, both within the summit location and across critical systems, disrupted the proceedings. It was an act of defiance, a statement from the Vanguard that they would not allow humanity to change its course. The sabotage was swift and devastating. Communications were cut off, vital security systems were compromised, and several key delegates were assassinated in the chaos. It was clear that the Vanguard had orchestrated the attack with military precision. The summit had devolved into a war zone, and the very people who had once been hopeful for peace were now fighting for their lives. The galaxy, on the verge of a new era, was teetering on the brink of collapse. Sarah, caught in the middle of the chaos, knew that the summit could not continue. But even as the violence erupted around her, she understood that the attack was not just a bid to end the summit, it was a bid to destroy humanity's future. The Vanguard had made it clear, they would not let peace prevail. They believed that humanity's rise to power was not just inevitable but necessary, and any attempt to change that order would be met with force. In the aftermath of the attack, Sarah and her loyal allies were forced into hiding. The summit had failed, and with it, any hope for a peaceful resolution. The Vanguard's rebellion had been ignited, and the galaxy was once again on the brink of war. The only question now was whether humanity could survive this civil war, and if they could, whether they would remain the rulers of the galaxy, or whether they would be forced to share it with the very species they had once sought to dominate. The Empire, now fractured, faced its greatest challenge yet. The future of humanity and the galaxy lay in the balance. In the wake of the devastating sabotage at the summit, the galaxy descended into chaos. The Vanguard's attack had not only shattered the fragile peace talks but also ignited a spark that would spread across human-controlled space. The rebellion, once a quiet underground movement, was now a full-scale insurgency. Across the galaxy, military outposts were being overrun, communications networks were crippled, and entire star systems were falling into anarchy. The Empire, which had once stood as a beacon of power and order, was now fractured, its unity shattered by internal division and external pressure. Sarah Rhodes, once a figure of strength and leadership, found herself at the center of a rapidly escalating conflict. Hiding in the deep shadows of the human resistance, she knew that her time as a leader within the Empire was over. The once dominant human military was now divided, and factions that had supported her vision of a peaceful future were quickly being overwhelmed by those who still clung to the old ways. The military hardliners, who had once respected her as a commander, now viewed her as a traitor. To them, she was the symbol of everything that had gone wrong with the Empire, the weakness that had led to its collapse. But Sarah refused to give up. She had seen the potential for peace, and she would fight to see it realized, even if that meant taking on the very forces she had once fought beside. She knew that the war was not just about survival, it was about the soul of humanity itself. Could they rise from the ashes of their empire and build something better, or would they fall back into the brutal, expansionist ways that had defined their history? Her first move was to rally the remaining supporters of her vision, those who believed in cooperation and unity over conquest. She reached out to the Voltar, who were still reeling from the sabotage but remained committed to the idea of a true partnership with humanity. Varlock, though a broken man in many ways, still believed that the galaxy's future depended on cooperation. Together, they began to form an alliance not built on domination but on mutual respect and shared goals. The Vanguard, however, was not the only threat. The remnants of the old imperial military, the hardline factions, had begun to consolidate their power. They were not content with simply surviving, they were intent on retaking control and reasserting humanity's dominance. They viewed the Voltar and the other alien species as nothing more than tools to be exploited. To them, Sarah's vision was a betrayal of everything they had fought for. The galaxy would be theirs once more, and anyone who stood in their way would be crushed. The fight for the future of the galaxy became a battle on two fronts, the war between humanity's military factions and the insurgency led by the Vanguard. Sarah knew that, to stand a chance at surviving, she would need to unite as many factions as possible. But the task was monumental. The galaxy, once united under humanity's banner, was now fractured beyond recognition. The very concept of human supremacy was in question, and the rebels believed that humanity could no longer rule the galaxy. Sarah's journey took her deep into the heart of the galaxy's unrest. She visited planets and star systems that had once been loyal to the Empire, trying to rally support for her cause. She met with leaders of resistance groups, both human and alien, hoping to forge a new alliance, one that could face the growing tide of rebellion and military aggression. But with each meeting, she was reminded of the immense challenge before her. The galaxy was divided, and trust had been broken in ways that might never be repaired. Meanwhile, Varlock continued to play a delicate game, trying to keep his people's loyalty while negotiating with Sarah and the humans who still believed in her vision. The Voltar, though weakened, still had a powerful military force at their disposal, and their support was vital if humanity had any hope of surviving the conflict. But even within the Voltar ranks, there were divisions. Some of their leaders were not convinced that they should help humanity. They saw the rising rebellion as a natural consequence of human overreach and believed that the galaxy's future lay in the hands of those who would dominate, not cooperate. The battle lines were drawn. On one side, there were the hardliners, determined to crush all opposition and restore the Empire to its former glory. On the other side, there were the insurgents, the Vanguard, led by those who believed that the galaxy should be free from human rule. And in the middle, there was Sarah, fighting to save not just humanity's future, but the future of all sentient species. She knew that if the hardliners were allowed to win, humanity would become nothing more than a violent, oppressive force, feared and hated across the galaxy. But if the Vanguard succeeded, they would tear down everything humanity had built, leaving nothing but anarchy in their wake. As the war escalated, Sarah found herself facing more than just external threats. Her closest allies began to question her decisions. Admiral Elias Kane, who had once stood by her side, was becoming increasingly disillusioned with the idea of peace through cooperation. He believed that humanity had to fight for its place in the galaxy, that if they didn't, they would be swallowed by the very forces they had once dominated. Their growing differences began to create tension between them, and Sarah knew that the unity of her own forces was fragile at best. The final confrontation was inevitable. The hardline factions of the military, backed by their loyal supporters, were preparing for a decisive strike, one that would either restore humanity's dominance or plunge the galaxy into full-scale civil war. At the same time, the Vanguard, emboldened by their growing support, launched a series of attacks, hoping to destabilize the remnants of the Empire and force humanity's withdrawal from galactic affairs. Sarah knew that the only way to prevent complete annihilation was to make one final push for peace. She called for a ceasefire, offering a final chance for negotiation with the hardliners, the Voltar, and the Vanguard. This would be the last opportunity to salvage a future for the galaxy, a future built on cooperation, mutual respect, and a shared understanding of what it meant to live in a galaxy that belonged to all species. As the battle for the galaxy's future raged on, Sarah stood at the crossroads, uncertain if she could unite the galaxy's fractured factions or if she would be swept away in the storm of war. The next few days would determine everything, whether humanity could rise from the ashes of its empire or fall into a new age of darkness. The final days of the war were nothing short of apocalyptic. The galaxy, once teeming with hope and ambition, was now a battlefield, divided, broken, and on the verge of annihilation. Sarah Rhodes stood at the precipice, her vision of a peaceful galaxy slipping further away with every passing moment. But even as the war raged, she refused to surrender. She knew that the only way forward was through a final act of diplomacy, an act that would either save or destroy everything. The ceasefire had been negotiated, but it was fragile. The military hardliners, led by General Marcus Hayes, had reluctantly agreed to halt their offensive, but only under the condition that they would be granted a seat at the table in any future negotiations. They believed that humanity's strength was in its ability to dominate, and any peace that didn't ensure human supremacy was a peace they could not accept. The Vanguard, on the other hand, saw the ceasefire as a necessary evil, but they had no intention of backing down. They wanted the complete dismantling of the empire, the overthrow of the human-controlled government, and the establishment of a new order where no species would hold power over the others. Sarah knew that bringing both sides to the table was a dangerous game. The hardliners and the Vanguard had no love for each other, and even less for her. Both groups saw her as a symbol of weakness, someone who had failed to keep humanity at the top of the galactic hierarchy. But Sarah was determined to prove them wrong. She knew that the galaxy could not survive another war, and that the only way to avoid complete destruction was to forge an agreement, one that would redefine humanity's role in the universe. The summit, held on a neutral world far from the front lines, was humanity's last chance. Representatives from all sides gathered, including Varlock and his Voltar delegation, who still believed in the possibility of a cooperative future. But the atmosphere was tense, charged with distrust and animosity. The hardliners, though present, made it clear that they would not be satisfied with anything less than a return to the old ways. The Vanguard, with their fierce determination and radical beliefs, were equally unyielding. And in the middle, Sarah stood alone, trying to hold together a fractured galaxy with words and ideas, while the forces of destruction and division loomed ever closer. The negotiations were tumultuous from the start. The hardliners demanded the reinstatement of human dominance, while the Vanguard called for the dissolution of the Empire and the establishment of a galaxy-wide council of species. Varlock, ever the diplomat, tried to mediate, but even his patience was beginning to wear thin. He knew that time was running out, that the galaxy couldn't survive much longer under the weight of its divisions. Sarah, struggling to keep control of the talks, finally made a bold move. She proposed a new structure for the galaxy, one that would take into account the needs and desires of all species. It wasn't a perfect solution, and it wasn't one that would make everyone happy, but it was the only way forward. The Empire, she argued, would be restructured as a federation, one where no species would be given more power than another, and where all races would have an equal voice in the decision-making process. The military, under this new arrangement, would no longer be used as a tool for conquest but as a force for protection and cooperation. The hardliners immediately rejected her proposal, arguing that it was a betrayal of everything humanity had fought for. General Hayes, in particular, was adamant that humanity could never allow itself to be ruled by a council of alien species. "We fought for this galaxy," he said, his voice filled with venom. "We bled for it. And now you want us to give it away? Never." The Vanguard, though initially suspicious of Sarah's motives, saw some merit in the idea. They had always believed that humanity had overstepped its bounds, but a federation could provide a framework for peace, one where their ideals of equality could be realized. Varlock, though hesitant, offered his support, but even he was unsure if the proposal would be enough to unite the galaxy. As the debates continued, Sarah found herself fighting not just for the galaxy's future, but for her own place in it. She was no longer the leader of the Empire, no longer the commander who had once led humanity to victory. She was a negotiator, a symbol of hope in the midst of a galaxy on the brink of collapse. And as the discussions reached their breaking point, she realized that the ultimate decision wasn't in the hands of the delegates, it was in the hands of the people. The galaxy had to decide. Could humanity learn to live alongside the species it had once dominated, or would it continue down a path of destruction and endless war? Would the hardliners accept a new way forward, or would they fight to the death for their vision of human supremacy? And most importantly, would the vanguard's dream of equality and freedom be realized, or would their revolution lead to a new era of suffering? The final agreement, forged under the threat of war and shaped by the unyielding will of Sarah and those who believed in her vision, was not perfect. It was a compromise, one that required humanity to give up its place at the top of the galactic hierarchy and share power with the other species. But it was a start. The galaxy, though scarred and divided, had a chance to rebuild. In the days that followed, the Federation began to take shape. New governments were established, and a council of species was formed to oversee the new galactic order. The military was restructured, its focus shifted from conquest to protection and cooperation. Sarah, though no longer the ruler of the Empire, remained a key figure in the Federation, a symbol of the possibility of peace in a galaxy that had known nothing but war for so long. And though the road ahead was still uncertain, Sarah knew that humanity had made its choice. They had chosen the hard path of cooperation over the easy path of domination. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was the only one that could save them. The galaxy was no longer under the control of a single species, it was a shared home, a place for all to thrive. And for the first time in centuries, Sarah believed that peace might actually be possible.